The second topic for today's episode pertains to movement, and the major change under the level 4 restriction basically has allowed for more movement, and insofar as Regulation 16.5 of the Disaster Management Act, which expressly provides that any person who was not at their place of residence or work before the lockdown period and who could not travel between provinces, metropolitan or district areas during the lockdown will be permitted on a once-off basis to return to their places of residence or work. And will be required to stay in such place until the end of level 4. This is also including children in terms of Regulation 17 of the Act, who had visited relatives before the lockdown and who would now be permitted to move back home or between provinces, also on a once-off basis.
Which is also great, especially with the children. On the once-off basis is very important, because we also got wind that in level 4 is when school will be resuming in 1st of June. So kids being at their primary home where they'll be schooling is best. But
for the grade 7s and grade 12s.
Yes. And then, like, if managed properly, I'm aware of like a number of people who have traveled back home, like my brother, for the lockdown. And now with level 4 and businesses opening, I can see a lot of people traveling to return to work or the provinces in which they reside for purposes of work. And when is the end of level 4 exactly? Like,
no one knows. It's indefinite. It's dependent on our behavior, on us adhering to the laws, on the virus stats going down.
Yeah, but don't you think that's where the communication is also missed? Where would it be more comforting if there was like a certain timeline that we were all given as citizens, that we're provided with the stuff, so that it's, yes, we understand it's uncharted territory for everybody, but like, I would work better if I knew that 2 weeks Nyana and we are at level 3, let's make it exciting. Give me something to work towards, and I think the only indication that has been provided is that the country will gradually adjust the levels across the country based on the level of COVID-19 infections. So under the new level regulation, in terms of Regulation 16.2F, further permits the walking, running, and cycling between the hours 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. within a 5-kilometer radius of their residence and not in organized groups. So, did you see all the joggers and cyclists and mothers with their prams on the promenade in Cape Town on the first day of level 4?
And I saw them, and all I can say is that I stress when I saw that amount of people in the epicenter of where the pandemic is basically unfolding. And I guess yet again, this just kind of speaks to the whole trial and error concept that we keep honing in week in and week out.
Yeah.
And I do believe that the large numbers we saw was due to the time limitations that have been imposed in level 4.
Yeah.
So I think this would also be a great chance for the powers that may be in the Western Cape to go back to the drawing board and make the relevant amendments in this regard, because it's clear to see that, especially insofar as the Western Cape, that this particular time limitation is breeding congregations. And we know that wherever there's congregations, then the principle of social distancing is only going to collapse. I mean, we saw drones and drones of people. It was a mess. It was a mess. And once the social distancing principle has collapsed, then the virus will just further spread. And before we know it, we'll be in level 10.
With cops right side every single house. Imagine 10.
We don't want that. We don't want that.
No, we don't want that at all. But I mean, again, I would love for amendments and regulations to look at, because again, the other thing that I was seeing like on Twitter is that they actually haven't even considered what season we're in now. We're in winter. And if you say 6 a.m. is dark, I can't even run at 6 a.m. because it's dark. So if
hopefully that will push people to not be out, and they'll stay at home. But what I also thought was further important to note for us is that some people will be going back to work.
Yeah.
And we've seen that there's a number of regulations and conditions that have been put in the workplace to make workplaces COVID-19 ready.
Yeah.
But of I don't know if you noticed this, and I think it's quite strange that, we now have a curfew under level 4, whereas a curfew didn't exist under level 5.
It is rather strange. I
Mhm.
mean, because at first it's based on the assumption that we were on strict lockdown and thus should all have not been out of our residence unless you provide essential services or are going out to purchase essentials. So I believe the reasoning that has been provided for the curfew is that to have some sort of control around the movements of those people going back to work so that you don't go straight home, so that you go straight home and not go visit friends or relatives or have a quick smoke somewhere. you know? And I think as per regulation 16.3 of the act, so the one thing that we during our research and which I came across was the Human Sciences Research Council survey, which that said that of almost 40,000 respondents released this the survey that was released based on 40,000 respondents, said that the majority of people adhered to the regulations. Or the results show that there were 99% either left their homes for food, medicine, and social grants, or stayed at home. 30% had not left home since the start of lockdown, and 62% had left to get food and or medicines. So the HSRC survey did not recommend a curfew or any similar steps, but it says that self-control needs to be encouraged, So
I agree with them
yeah,
wholeheartedly. I do. And I mean, another concern of mine insofar as the curfew is what happens if after 8 p.m. you need to rush to the gas station and buy airtime?
mm,
Maybe
mm,
you have an emergency. The
mm,
piece of legislation is not providing for that at all.
quickly. Yeah, and I think
Uh,
it really touches on what we're talking about, the access to justice and what this our platform is about, and just bringing people in, making them understand. If you can just show us which legislation empowers you to put this step or this regulation,
in place, yes.
yeah,
So the Constitution via Section 21 provides for a right to freedom of movement. And
yeah,
we've seen under this lockdown that our right to freedom of movement has been restricted, it's been limited.
yeah,
And that is allowed in terms of Section 36 of the Constitution as well, in terms of the limitation clause.
yeah,
So now under level 4, the particular limitations that we're talking about is first the time limitations to exercise, and now this curfew.
mm,
And I mean, we understand that the limitation clause does empower government to limit certain rights,
yeah.
but we need to understand
What's the empowering?
yes, what is the empowering provision? Because the limitation clause also states that certain guidelines have to be adhered to, insofar as is there rationality in you limiting our right? Is there a factual basis why you are limiting this right? I
Yeah,
mean, if the survey is showing that we've been adhering to the lockdown provisions, then why are you putting in place a curfew? What is the factual considerations that went into that decision? And very, very important as well is that the survey further stated that once the lockdown has been lifted, we need to adhere to some sort of preventative behavior change measures as South Africans,
mm,
and that South Africans have to be encouraged to take responsibility for their own decisions and own actions.
yeah,
And so I guess the implementation of this curfew is completely um, polarity, in terms of those two stances are so they're quite evident.
not a democracy.
No, yeah, we there is a democracy. We voted for these people into power,
Just like
and we
I genuinely feel like, as you said, if we had, a better explanation, a communication that speaks to how you got to this, there would be more buy-in, people be more understanding. And
definitely.
yeah, yeah. So again,
Yeah, so that's very important. And you know what? In closing, the focus of level 4 has just been to restart the economy. The
mm,
government has said that there may be a time when the different provinces will be placed under different lockdown levels based on the COVID-19 infections in that particular province. So please don't catch yourself not complying. Until then, we will be keeping you guys abreast on any new regulations, new amendments. And please, guys, let us comply. Let us comply.
Let us stay home. Let us play our parts. Be responsible citizens for ourselves so that we all get out of this sooner and we all just still living and can run, at level 1 without caring who's around us. So I think let's just all take the ability to play our part and just comply. With that said,
we miss those days. We miss those days, and we can't wait to go back to those days.
Absolutely. Okay, my friend, toodles. Go cook.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you so much for all the questions that you've been giving us week in and week out, for all the opinions you've been sharing with us. And till next week, we'll see you all then. Bye.